Hello and welcome to my video. In this video I will explain what my late toxic husband revealed to me about how ordinary everyday events are used to trivially relate the targeted person to the criminals used. I saw many such events, but here is one in which I had become suspicious but still dismissed it because I could not attribute significance to the incident. It happened outside the Chinese herbalist where I went for treatment for what appeared from time to time as a heart problem. As I parked my car, I noticed two men standing on the other side of the road looking intently at me. I said to my husband, "Who are they? They look suspicious." He answered truthfully in saying, "Just like you, I am only seeing them for the first time." But he was not honest when he said, "So how am I to know who they are?" Because, as he later revealed, he was responsible for their presence. However, he had used a go-between to obtain them from corrupt parole officers. On that day, my herbalist had taken my pulse and prepared my herbs quickly, so I returned to the waiting room earlier than usual. I noticed my husband was not there waiting for me, so I went outside to see if he was outside. I saw him next to the men who were still on the other side of the road. When he saw me, he immediately crossed the road. "What were you talking to them for?" I asked. "Oh," he replied, "I just wanted to see who they were. They told me that they were not from this area." I felt something was wrong, but as the events looked ordinary, I dismissed them. It was much later, after the night I was packing to leave my husband, as I related in my first video, that I realized they could have been the same men who were standing at the end of our driveway and who were used by my husband to pose a concealed threat, which created my health problems, the chest pain and the breathing difficulties. How could I have become aware of them when I never saw or heard them? I was puzzled because the scientific view that I had learnt at university was that two strangers won't become aware of the other's presence if there is no sensory information. My husband revealed to me that where some relationship exists, it can be used to make it possible for everyone to become aware of a stranger's presence in their vicinity without having sensory information. Some people may become suspicious of them, but not know why. So, to be able to pose a concealed threat, the targeted person must first be related to the criminals used. This needs to be done without the targeted person realizing it. And while a relationship with the criminals is created, there must also be a three-way entanglement with a strongly related person, who is usually the chief offender and often a spouse or close relative. And this relationship, this three-way relationship, is an uncommon relationship, because while the chief offender is related to the criminals used, the targeted person has no knowledge of that relationship. It was then that I realised that the unsettling but seemingly ordinary events that took place outside the herbalist's office was done to relate me to the criminals he used. My husband told me that there were two basic ways of relating the targeted person to the criminals used. And he also said that depending on what is said and done on those occasions, the relational entanglement can be mild, moderate, or strong. And these may also be called weak relational entanglements or weak mental entanglements. They are all basically the same thing. To create a trivial relationship with criminals, the targeted person has to see or hear the criminals but dismiss the incident because their actions are seen to be ordinary. This is called using the normal approach in toxic people's jargon. The normal approach method works well because it normally does not sound any alarm bells. The few people with greater awareness who see them and get suspicious are called paranoid. In some trivial relationships, the criminals are only seen or heard from afar, and they are almost always in a public place. So, for instance, at a restaurant, where the chief offender and the targeted person is dining. The criminals cause a commotion outside the restaurant in the street. A small commotion, which is enough for the targeted person to look at them or in their direction. But it is not enough to arouse most people's suspicions. In the other type of trivial relationship, the criminals are seen more closely. For example, they may be seen as two mates who suddenly call a greeting to one another a short distance from the targeted person in a bar, and they may be positioned behind the targeted person so that they can only be heard. Whether seen and or heard, they will attract some attention, but not enough for the targeted person to remember them if they see them again sometime later. The criminals may be seen very closely and for a longer period of time outside their house as people asking for directions for some nearby street or public place from the chief offender. A stronger mental entanglement can be created by introducing the idea of danger and even pointing out the criminals involved, but always as strangers. So the relationship between the targeted person and the criminals is trivial. For instance, say a lady was visiting a relative in another town, and unbeknown to her, he's toxic. One day, soon after she has arrived, he follows her out to her car and tells her he had forgotten to tell her something. He then proceeds to tell her that while his neighbourhood is a safe area, there has been a security problem recently, that a robbery had taken place. He then tells her that as a result, he has kept a watch on who is coming and going to see if there are strangers or suspicious people around. That way he justifies his action of pointing out a car that he has seen recently. He then tells her that he saw them leave soon after she left on the previous day, and thus justifies himself asking her if they are with her. Of course, doesn't say he has not seen the car before, because of course he knows them. Of course she doesn't know them, but again she concludes that he must not know them. This method brings the criminals to her attention, and he has associated the robbery with the strangers and the strangers with her. And when he points them out, she feels fear, and it seems logical to feel fear if she's being told of a security problem and strangers being pointed out. But what she doesn't know is that the person she is with, the toxic relative, is really making a threat, because the threat is made by an agreement between the chief offender and the criminals. The agreement is, if I raise my hand and point to you, then you get ready to shoot. If I drop my hand suddenly, then shoot. Of course, he raises his hand to point out the car to his relative, so the danger is posed by the chief offender. The moment he points out the car of criminals, she will feel fear at that point, but consider it natural. And the deceit is such that she may even trust him more, because his moves appear to be protective. Since she doesn't see them, and the car is ordinary, she cannot identify them or the car if she sees them sometime later. This method creates a strong verbal suggestion of being followed. It can then be used to cause the woman anxiety wherever she goes. You may ask, why would a relative do such a thing? The toxic man may not want to assist his relative to be a guest in his house. However, he doesn't want to say so openly when asked, because he doesn't want other relatives to see him as mean. His method would mean that the woman would leave his house as soon as possible. At the same time, he continues to appear benevolent to other relatives, so he preserves his mask or clean public image. Another way is for the chief offender to report the presence of criminals to the targeted person. This may be in the workplace, in the office where they work, and in the presence of others. Let's say the chief offender this time is a woman, and perhaps even the boss. She reports that she had heard that there are criminals in the car park next to their building and where they normally park their cars. She goes on to say that talking to some other office workers, she found that these people are drug dealers, are armed and mean business, meaning that they would shoot anyone who gets in their road or who might see them and get suspicious. This type of entanglement creates an ongoing threat in a place where the targeted person is forced to park his or her car during working hours and after hours if they are asked to work late. The work late treatment may be used as a deterrent to stop an honest employee from speaking up about any corruption that they see being done through the office. It may also be done for the pleasure of the toxic people. If it is stepped up, then the person may suffer ongoing heart problems that need medical treatment. So there is work for the doctors. In creating a trivial relationship, the chief offender must be present, but not always seen by the targeted person. For instance, they may be inside the house and only looking out through a window momentarily while the targeted person's attention is attracted. Thus, they may not be seen by the targeted person. The chief offender, even when seen with the criminals, may still not arouse suspicions, because most people will not suspect the chief offender's motives, or that the chief offender knows the criminals. A person who is more aware and who becomes suspicious is easily fobbed off as being too suspicious. If they insist, the chief offender may call them delusional and be backed up by a doctor in discrediting them. With a trivial relationship, the targeted person is blind-sighted, so a threat can then be posed which is concealed. To understand what is happening, we need to first examine the toxic personality a little bit. Thank you for viewing my video. I'll see you in the next video. In the next video, I will begin the discussion on the concealed threat. And as this subject is dark, for my humane viewers, here is a short video of the friar bird eating berries in one of my trees. Something to make your heart sing again. It was much later, on the night that I was packing to leave my husband, as I related in my first video, that I realised they could have been the same men who were standing at the end of our driveway and were used by my husband to pose a concealed threat. Strangers won't be aware of the other's presence.